Christ has not been raised, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith. That's 1 Corinthians 15:14. Always be prepared to make a defense to anyone who calls you to account for the hope that is in you. That is 1 Peter 3:15. Okay, Christians, we want to know if you have any good reasons to believe that Jesus rose from the dead. For real. We've heard arguments before, and they've always fallen as flat as a corpse rotting in a tomb. If you think you can do any better, give us a call, because the show is starting right now. All right. Welcome, everyone. Today is Sunday, July 27th, 2025. I'm your host, Scott Dickie, and joining me today is my brother from another continent, Richard Gilliver. Richard, how you doing today?
I'm very, very good. I'm very looking forward to. Does that make sense? I'm very much looking forward to both doing a show with you, because I always enjoy working with you, Scott, and taking calls on the resurrection Christians. This show is all about the resurrection.
Yeah, and I can almost sense as if Christ is in the room here with us. I'm getting a kind of an odd feeling. It's just although he's really flexing hard there. Yeah. And I hear you've been talking some smack a little bit this week too about throwing the gauntlet down to these Christian believers.
Absolutely.
Here.
Look, we have on lots and lots of different occasions, Christians saying two things to us. One is that if as you've just stated in your opening, in fact, if the resurrection is not true, then Christianity is not true. And, I've had people say that to me in debates before. I've had people just on random social media say that to me. And also, one thing I get a lot is people just preaching, the old Jesus loves you and you'll go to hell type of stuff if you don't believe. That's not
such
going
a loving
to convince,
message.
It's not going to convince anyone.
Right.
It's not going. That is not convincing. That is the least convincing thing you can say to me. In fact, that suggests to me that you do not have either evidence or arguments, because if you did, you'd bring them instead of talking at people. So Christians, I am calling you out specifically. Christians, you're always telling us that we only pick on Christians on this show, and we never talk to anybody else of any other religion. It's always the Christians that we're having a go at. So Christians, I am calling you out specifically. I am fulfilling your own prophecy here. I am calling you out specifically. We want you to call and give us your best evidence for the resurrection, because I have good reasons why I don't accept it. Scott has good reasons why he doesn't accept it, and we can go into all of them, but we also want the reasons that you do accept it, and let's work through all three positions and see which, if any, is the most likely to be true. So, the ball's in your court. Give us a call. Don't just sit there commenting on our social media telling us that Jesus loves us, because that doesn't work. We want the evidence. Bring it. It's the most vital component of your religion. Give us the evidence.
Yeah, we're here. The gauntlet has been thrown down. So we're going to see. There's a couple of billion Christians in the world. Let's see if even one of them will pick up that gauntlet today. But before we do that, I just want to remind you, Talk Heathen, of course, is a production of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. Talk Heathen is a live call-in show, and we do have open lines, although I see calls are starting to come in. So give us a call at 512-991-9242 or from your computer at tiny.cc/callth. We air live every Sunday at 1 p.m. Central on YouTube. But remember, if you can't make it for whatever reason, you can find us wherever you get your podcast from. Make sure you follow us on Patreon if you'd like, where our subscribers get access to bonus content like the after show recordings and early releases of our episodes. All right. So before we dive into these calls that are starting to line up here, I would like to bring up our guest, our backup host this week, Jamie the Blind Limey. Jamie, it's always good to see you.
It's always good to...
No pun intended there.
Yeah, it's always good to somehow perceive you too.
Exactly. All right. I'll take it. I'll take that.
But anyway, so I'm being brought up because we every week ask you lovely viewers a question in our Talk Heathen to Me segment. And last week we asked you, what is, or name a creepy Bible verse. And we have three winners.
All right.
In at number 3, we have Cnault. Creepiest verse, Psalms 81:10. I am the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt. Open thy mouth wide, and I will fill it. That's the KJV, and one of the modern translations might be, I am the Lord thy God, blow me.
That tracks. I think that melds well with the overall message of the whole book, I think.
Let Jesus come into you. Anyway, impromptu ASMR there. Number 2, Chuck Gaidos. Did Jacob really just wrestle with God? Or was the real story too creepy for publication?
Right. Wrestling in a biblical sense, right?
Yeah, yes, to know in a biblical sense, so to speak.
Right, exactly.
And yeah, I actually prefer to think of it as actually just a wrestling match, but that's because I'm a flipping Mark, and Richard knows what that means. Anyway, and number 1, Colin Matz. Creepiest Bible verse, Genesis 19. Oh, I know this one. Genesis 19:31 and 32. The firstborn said to the younger, our father is old, and there is not a man on earth to come to us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may reserve the seed of our father. Dear Penthouse, you'll never guess what happened to me.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
No, the thing about that verse is that it's creepy enough. It doesn't even require any kind of massaging on our, no innuendo or anything like that. It's just present it as it is.
Anyway, let us clean our brains of that filth.
Yes,
and,
please.
And go to the next question. For next week, the prompt is, why did Jesus come back after he was crucified? Wrong answers only. So, do either of you have a witty answer for that one?
Richard, what are your thoughts there?
I don't know. I've not got a sense of humor, so I've not got a witty answer. However, I think this is a clear sign that, you've just alluded to the Old Testament. I think Jesus came back because after he'd died in those 3 days, the message had started spreading. It was a nice guy. Oh, this Christianity is such a nice thing. This Christ is such a lovely, lovely guy. Help thy neighbor and all that. And I think he came back and said, no. The Old Testament is correct. In fact, as one with God, I'm a bit of a twat. I like to drown everybody on earth. I like to order people to go out and murder whole people, including small infant boys, and take their virgin daughters as spoils of war. That's what I am. Stop misrepresenting me. So I think that is why Jesus came back from the dead.
Oh, that was a heavy answer there, Richard. Well, I'm not a Bible scholar or anything, but if I remember back from my Sunday school days, I seem to remember something in this story about how when the Roman soldiers were putting up the people that were being crucified that day, they distinctly asked, does anybody need to use the bathroom? Now is the time to do it. And I seem to remember a verse that said, and Jesus said no, yea, though his bladder runneth over. So I think Jesus just need to come back and use the restroom. I think that was the deal. And of course, the Roman soldiers are like, every damn time this happens.
Well, if Jesus was anything like me, he'd come back after the resurrection and forget why he did it. Just like, I'm sure I was supposed to be here for something, but anyway, if it's important,
I feel your pain there, Jamie. I feel your pain.
So that's the prompt. Why did Jesus come back after the resurrection? We'll come back to life. Wrong answers only. Put your answers in the comments below, not in the chat, and we will pick 3 winners for the next show. So take it away, gentlemen. I'm sure you'll have a wonderful show.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jamie. Appreciate it. All right. So, and before we dive into our first call here, I also want to take a moment to thank the crew. There's a lot of people that work behind the scenes here. Let's bring up that crew cam if we can. Look at all those wonderful people there trying to help Richard and I look halfway respectable here. So thank you all for the hard work that you do. Let's show some love for them in the chat as well. And I don't know, Richard, are you ready to dive into our first call here?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go for it.
This first call, I think, is going to be one that you are especially liking here, and that is we have Cows, our friend, she, her from the Netherlands. Cows, our friend, thanks for calling in today. You want to talk about faith in Buddhism, and I think that Richard might have a few things to say about that. How are you doing today, Cows, our friend?
Hi there, I'm doing well, thank you. Yeah, thanks for taking my call. It's good to speak to both of you again. We actually had a conversation a couple of months back about supernatural aspects of Buddhism. And I think some interesting things came up in that call that I would like to discuss today, namely like the justification of my faith in Buddhism, and maybe how it's different from other religions, if that's okay with you too.
Sure thing. Just one quick question before we dive into this. What exactly, when you say faith in Buddhism, what are you talking about there? What do you mean by that?
So faith in Buddhism to me is really the belief that the Buddha was actually an enlightened being, that he actually attained the enlightenment he was talking about, that he properly taught that to others, and that to this day, like, there's still sort of a living memory of that it's still possible to follow his example in doing that.
Gotcha. All right. Well, what specific part of that did you want to talk about today?
Yeah, so based on the call we are having, I was thinking over like what could be the difference between that and, for example, faith in the resurrection of Jesus, or like similar points in other religions. And I think maybe what really sets it apart is that in Buddhism, faith is a starting point. So, like, rather than just believing and then that belief being the purpose behind Buddhism, that is meant to sort of point you in a direction where you then undergo a practice. And that practice is supposed to then give you actual direct insight in the nature of reality. So through sort of observing, like in meditation and things like that, like the way things happen, that is the actual ground of learning. So whatever the scriptures say, actual reality as experienced is above that. I think that might be a bit of a different perspective than we would find in many other religions.
Why would you take that step? Why would anyone take that step if we've got, let's say, 5 people who've all dug a hole, and they say, down my hole is the truth. This religion, this hole is true. All the other people who've dug their holes, they are not true. Mine is the only true one. But before you can know this truth, you've got to take a leap of faith, as it were, and jump in the hole and just trust my word that it is true. We only have a certain amount of time on this earth, and we cannot possibly investigate every single religion. So why, before we even start talking about whether the practice of Buddhism confirms this faith, why should we even take that leap to begin with?
I think there are things in Buddhism that are beneficial, even if you're not ready to commit to it. Certainly, like, my approach to Buddhism wasn't one where I just took a big leap of faith. I sort of dipped in my toes, as it were, and fell to waters. And I did some meditation and I did some reading and kind of liked what I saw without immediately taking on this entire belief system, this huge doctrine. Because you don't really have to. Like, you can benefit massively from meditation without believing anything about Buddhism. So specifically for Buddhism, I would say like that can be an entry, and it's an entry that I see less in other religions, where I think it really does start with a blind faith in a particular thing before any of those benefits are supposed to happen.
Okay, we lost Richard for a second there. I'm not sure if he's quite back yet, but what Richard was asking you is, why should we believe this? Why should you jump in this particular hole? Why blind faith in this particular direction? You mentioned something about you saw benefits immediately after adopting these beliefs. Do you think that's a good reason to hold the beliefs in the first place? Is it purely a consequentialist kind of a perspective that you're taking here, or do you think that there is value in truth itself, or are you separating those two things here?
So quick correction there. Like it's not that I adopted the beliefs and then I saw a benefit. It's really I adopted certain practices that to me at the time were not already connected to all the beliefs. And that's where I got benefits. And that's what made me confident that maybe adopting more of this like package that we call Buddhism could be beneficial to me. But sorry,
you're still not addressing the question. Is about truth, not about benefit, right?
Yeah, but to me, benefit is the more important thing here, actually. Like I think that following a particular religion, especially something like Buddhism, which is very much a practice more than a set of beliefs, it should be about benefit. If you're doing the Buddhism and it's actually not helping you at all, you should stop doing the Buddhism.
Do you think that other faiths also have followers who may have taken a similar journey to you? I certainly know I know Christians and Muslims who have converted to that religion from other faiths or none, and they certainly it seems to have improved their lives personally. They seem to be getting benefits from them. You started this by saying that this faith, this Buddhist faith, was somewhat different to other faiths, and yet from what you've said so far, it seems that we can see parallels to all of that in other religions. What about this do you think makes it distinct?
What I think makes it distinct is that it does not start with a belief, or it doesn't have to start with a belief. So I don't know, maybe you have an idea about this, but I would not know how you would start Christianity without believing in Jesus, or without believing in the resurrection of Jesus, or without believing that belief in Jesus brings you to heaven, or any of that. Like, that seems to me like it's a starting point. Whereas many of the big belief claims in Buddhism, they come later. Like, you can't start with Buddhism without believing in them.
Don't you think that people from, you're saying that, yes, you start without having this belief, but you did say that you'd read a little bit, you'd taken on a couple of practices which had benefits for you, and these, I presume, we're going to get to, these have re-informed your faith and strengthened your faith that Buddhism is true. Don't you think that's possible in other religions, that people who convert to the religion, they begin not with the belief that it's true immediately, but they do see aspects of it. They might read a little bit about Islam, for example, and that makes sense to them, and then start living in accordance with the way that Islam says you should live, and that brings benefit to them, and that informs that the religion is true. So they're not their journey is parallel to yours. They're not starting immediately from saying, right, that's it, Islam is true, I believe in God. They are doing the similar or the same thing that you're doing in the case of what you've explained your path was, where they are saying, right, this seems to make sense to me. This seems to be giving me benefits. Maybe there's something more to it.
Yes, I see your point. Yeah, that I do think that it could happen like that. Yes.
So just to clarify your position here, you're labeled here as a theist. So you do believe in the supernatural claims of the Buddhist faith. You believe things like reincarnation, things like, the Buddha's reincarnated and so on and so forth. So you started out along this Buddhist path because of the practices, and then you eventually came to understand and appreciate and eventually believe the supernatural aspects of it. That would be the first part of the question here. The second part is, but we wanted to talk about the truth of the faith, the truth of the beliefs there. And so whether or not you think the truth is important, that's really the question that we're asking about. I think it'd be pretty easy to make an argument that having true beliefs is beneficial to the believer and to society in general. How do you reconcile that? How do you reconcile your particular path to attaining these beliefs, to prioritizing things you said you had personal benefits. I could again argue that there are personal benefits for believing true things. And so how does that mesh? How does that fit together in your perspective there?
So I think it is important to believe true things. And if it was shown to me, or if I discovered that something that I believed from scripture, or just like from my assumptions about Buddhism, if I've discovered that it was not true, then I would have to reject it. And I would think that holding on to a belief like that would not be beneficial to me. It would be harmful. At the same time, though, I do have the confidence to trust in the teachings of the Buddha when they're not shown false, but also when I don't know yet that they are definitely true. So in that sense, like I would consider the Buddha to be a teacher. And just like a teacher in a classroom, you may not like directly understand like all the theory behind like the math thing that the teacher is explaining, but you would still sort of trust the teacher about the math that they're explaining on like the whiteboard. In a similar way, I approach the teachings of the Buddha. And in regard to like my labeling as a theist, I'm afraid your calling system just doesn't have a good category for non-theistic Buddhists.
Yeah, it's quite difficult, and I appreciate that you've labelled yourself as a theist from my perspective, actually, because it does, it gave Scott an indication that you did believe in the supernatural aspects. So I actually do appreciate that. I'm interested. I'm really, really interested in this kind of, where do we draw the line? Where do we draw the line on this? You know, we've spoken before. You know that I've studied both the Buddhist scriptures and have and still do continue to practice meditation. I am not convinced that any of the supernatural aspects of the Buddhist teachings are true at all. I don't get none of anything I've practiced, none of anything I have read have led me to that conviction. What do you think I'm doing wrong? Where is the line? Where is the demarcation line?
I don't know what you're doing wrong. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe I should be less trusting of ancient text by guys who claim to have found something while sitting under a tree. Like for me, it's really like I have that faith. And I can't really tell you right now where it came from or like why I found that, but I really do genuinely believe that the Buddha was enlightened and that his teaching is meaningful. And from that belief, I'm willing to extend like this extra trust, even though like I would have never done that without this faith in the Buddha. Yeah, I cannot tell you why I have that faith though.
So it really is. So it's almost literally blind faith, really, is what you're talking about here.
I guess at this point, yes, it is. I think it would be just the honest thing to say here that for me, it is right now blind faith in the enlightenment of the Buddha.
Are you comfortable with that position?
follows
Are
that.
you comfortable with following blind faith? I mean, do you think that that's a productive or reasonable or even safe approach to things?
No, I'm not comfortable with blind faith. I would much rather know for sure.
So how do those ideas all sit in your head then? How do those ideas, on this hand here, I have this blind faith in the Buddha, and on this other hand, I realize that I have this blind faith and I'm not comfortable with it. How does that cognitive dissonance kind of play itself out? How do you feel when you think about that? Does it kind of push you to avoid thinking about things? Does it push you to, is there an emotional response there? And I know that you feel comfortable with the practices of Buddhism, many of which, as Richard was saying, you can enjoy and engage in without the quote unquote the religion part of the religion. I mean, how does that sit with you? Do you consider yourself to be a skeptic?
That's a difficult question. I mean, they're all very difficult questions. Like I very much hope to learn more and to discover more. And I believe that the practice that I'm doing, the path that I've chosen, is actually one that leads away from blind faith to understanding. So yes, I am uncomfortable with blind faith in the Buddha, but I'm still willing to walk this path further because I believe that it will turn me away from that blind faith to actual understanding.
So how would you address Richard's question? What's the difference then between you and him? Is he doing something wrong? You said you might be the one doing something wrong here. I still want to feel, I feel like you say you're on a path, and I think that's wonderful. You say that you're curious, that you want to investigate, that you want to look into things. I think that's wonderful. Yet in the meantime, you're professing this blind faith. Do you think maybe you got those in the wrong order there, or what would Richard be doing differently than what you've done?
Like, what is Richard doing differently now, or?
Yeah,
like,
Richard's on a path of discovery as well. Richard is a very curious human being. He likes to study these kind of things, and I think he's at least partially motivated by a desire to know, to believe true things. Is that is he fundamentally different than the way you're approaching it, or are these really minor differences, and maybe you're just on a different part of the same path?
I mean, I cannot speak for Richard, obviously. Maybe Richard can say why he read all this and clearly has like this deep interest in the early Buddhist texts and in the practices. But
yeah, Richard, why don't you believe in the supernatural aspects of Buddhism? You're dropping the ball here, Richard. What's going on?
I'm not convinced that they're true. I'm not convinced that there's any evidence, any empirical evidence that they're true. I'm not convinced that the practice I've undertaken has demonstrated them to be true. I've spoken to the abbot of, I'm not going to say who it is or which monastery. I spoke to the abbot of a monastery a few years ago, and who was essentially my meditation teacher at the time. And I asked him about this, I said, I don't believe in any of these supernatural aspects. Why don't I believe in any of, why don't I believe in these things when they are told to us that they are true in the scriptures? And his response was, I considered it throwaway, if I'm honest with you. His response was, keep practicing and it will come to you in time. I've kept practicing and they have not come to me. So I'm not convinced by them. Nothing in the scriptures themselves convinces me about them. The Buddhist scriptures, the texts we're talking about are really, really good. We're talking about the Pali Canon. I happen to know that Cal's a friend is what school of Buddhism. I'm not going to say because I don't know if they're happy for that information to be divulged. But I'm familiar with the school of Buddhism they are from. I've read those scriptures. The Pali Canon, which is that school, the scriptures that belong to that school, is very good at saying you can misunderstand things in practice. When it speaks about what are called the jhanas are particularly subtle states of meditation. And what it says about these is you will get to a point in practice, in your meditation practice, where you will enter a state of bliss and you will confuse this state of bliss for the attainment of enlightenment. And you shouldn't get caught up in that. You've got to be mindful when you're in these states that you don't fall into this trap of confusing the one thing for the other. And I think that's very good. I think it's very good advice. The problem seems to be that Buddhists themselves are doing this. When they're practicing things and taking stuff on faith without any evidence that this faith is actually true, other than, well, it feels good. And certain aspects, and this is why I mentioned the other religions earlier on, because this happens in all religion. There's no evidence that it's true, but certain things are true that have been said. There's stuff that can be empirically tested, that community brings happiness and support, and, your practice is strengthened by having a community around you. All these things are true. They are absolutely true. But they're not the supernatural elements. And it seems that Buddhists and other religious people from other traditions all fall into this same trap of saying, well, because that aspect of it is true, then this strengthens my faith in this other supernatural aspect of which I don't have any evidence for. And that is a really, really big mistake. I want to ask Cal's a friend, in the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, which was the sutra from the Buddha's deathbed, essentially, he was asked specifically by one of his followers how we should follow the right path, how we should know that what we are doing in practice is correct when the Buddha has passed away. And the Buddha said that you should cross-reference his teachings, what he has taught while he was alive, with your own practice and the practice of the Sangha, which is the Buddhist community of monks and nuns. Do you not think that methodology is very, very circular? That you're confirming things with the community that has this belief in what the Buddha's taught, and your own practice, which is heavily influenced by what the Buddha's taught. And if you somewhat deviate, you talked earlier about not having evidence that the supernatural stuff wasn't true, so you were going to accept it until such a time as you did. So if you were to follow the Buddha's instructions and you came across evidence that said X supernatural element of Buddhism was not true, let's say reincarnation. I've come across evidence that reincarnation isn't true. How should I follow this according to the Buddha's teachings? Well, I should cross-reference it with his teachings and the Buddhist community. So you refer to the scriptures, you refer to the Sangha, the Buddhist community. The scriptures tell you that reincarnation is true. And the Buddhist community who have faith in the Buddhist teachings also tell you that reincarnation is true. So if you are being a good Buddhist, what you should do is reject your findings, because that is not what you've been told to do in the scriptures. You have been told to cross-reference things to make sure you're on the right path by cross-referencing these three elements. And if one of them is found to be out, reject that. So, Cal's a friend, and I want to ask you, do you not think this is circular? Do you not understand that this is a really poor methodology for checking that something is true? And it, in fact, entraps you, in a way, into staying in something, even if you did find that evidence that it was not true.
Yes, the way you describe it there is very circular. And I think unavoidably circular in any sort of teaching that is structured the way Buddhism is, with like an original teacher and then a doctrine that develops out of that, and then an attempt to keep that doctrine kind of stable over time. I think another important aspect of the sutta that you named, though, is the Buddha saying that we ought to make an island for ourselves. So to make a practice that is actually truly like not self-dependent. That's actually a very bad word in Buddhism, but that does not depend on like all these other factors, like all these other people's, all these views that exist in the world. And I think going by that, you would have to abandon even what the Sangha says, even what the Buddha says, eventually. But that's eventually, and of course, up to then, it's still like this sort of circular thing. So yeah, I would agree with you that that's sort of a dangerous thing. But like, is it danger enough reason to not do it? Is what I ask myself. Given that right now it seems so beneficial to me, and it seems so beneficial to so many other people. Is it really so bad to walk this path?
But do you have to reject?
Sorry, go ahead, Richard.
Do you have to reject the practice? Because, as you know, I practice Buddhist meditation. I just don't believe in the supernatural aspects of it. Dr. Richard Firth Godby here, who is, a very good friend of ours, is an expert in emotion, and he puts out these things every day, these little snippet things about emotions, about good emotional health. And he often refers to Buddhism and Buddhist meditation as being emotionally healthy things. You don't have to reject the practice of it simply to acknowledge that it is not that it's not true in the larger sense of things, but it is beneficial for you. The aspects of Buddhism which are true are really good for our emotional health. So take them and reject those parts of it, the supernatural elements that are not true. And we have no reason to think are true. You don't have to abandon the practice at all in order to do that. And, I'm often criticized by atheists on this show and in other arenas where for saying that my goal is not to stop any religious person. It's not to stop Christians being Christian. It's not to stop Muslims being Muslims. What I want to do is give people the scaffolding to understand the importance of believing things for good reasons. That's all I want to do. And what they do with that information is entirely up to them. Now, you seem to, when we're having these conversations, both in this call and the previous call you made to the show, you seem to be able to grasp this and understand that actually that is circular, and actually there isn't a good reason for that. And actually there's not a good reason for this. And yet you have this cognitive dissonance going off where you're still clinging to it being true. And I'm not saying to you must abandon all Buddhist practice. What I'm saying to you is the intellectually honest position is to acknowledge that there is no good reasons for believing the supernatural elements of Buddhism. So what do? We abandon this kind of grasping at it as if it is true. And then when we get on with the good elements of it, the parts that are beneficial to us and continue being beneficial to our lives, you can do that. That's an absolutely fine thing to do. Nobody is saying to you, you should stop being labeling yourself a Buddhist even, or partaking in these practices. What we're saying to you is build this scaffolding around the way you assess beliefs, because at the moment, I think you're an amazing person, Cow's a friend. You know that. We've had these conversations many times on the Discord, in the after shows and whatnot. I really do admire you. You've come out, you've corrected me a couple of times on things I've said regarding Buddhism, and I really, really appreciate that. But there is this cognitive dissonance that you've got going off, and I think it's really important to acknowledge that cognitive dissonance is there, and then say to yourself, exactly as you would in meditation practice, right, I've seen this for what it is. I should now accept the true things, the beneficial things, and reject those things that aren't beneficial. And I think clinging to supernatural beliefs, or the hope that supernatural beliefs are true, is not beneficial. That's my opinion on it. You may disagree. I'm going to let you respond to me, and then I'm going to let Scott jump in and have a say as well.
Okay.
Well, thank you. I think that's a valid, very valid perspective, and I don't have a direct response here. This is something I need to consider and sit on for a little bit, and I might go in another time to keep discussing it, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely, that's
yeah,
okay.
I think, Richard, I think you made an excellent point there. We can separate the practices that might have some beneficial side effects. We can separate that from the supernatural belief, and one could even argue that we should separate those because one can be justified in cases where the other one is not justified. You mentioned that you are kind of in a blind faith situation. You recognize the risk of blind faith. I also want to point out that there was a couple of times that you mentioned the idea of believing something until it's proven otherwise. I think we know that can be a risky approach as well. And so to me, it seems like you're trying to cope with these kind of conflicts that are going on in your mind, which I think is an awesome place to be, because you're in a point where you stand to learn something about yourself and about your beliefs, and possibly even about the world and about humanity in general. So I think that's an interesting and very good place to be. I'm thinking we should maybe wrap up this call here. We've been talking for over 30 minutes. Not that it wasn't fascinating for me to listen to, but any parting thoughts on the idea of treating those two concepts, the practices and the supernatural beliefs? Any thoughts going forward as we gear up for your next call, next time you call in to talk about it?
I think it's very valid to consider them separate, and also that Buddhist practice is really something that can be done without any of the supernatural beliefs. I will have to think about it more, though.
Okay.
So,
all right. Well, thanks
thank
for
you
your
very
call.
much for taking my call.
Yeah, it was our pleasure, Cowser friend. Thanks for calling in. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I imagine we might be seeing you in the after show. Both Richard and I will be hopping in there, so we can maybe continue this there. But really appreciate your call, Cowser friend. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. So before we jump into our next call here, I just have a couple of quick announcements. We got the Bat Cruise coming up. And Richard, I think you're still a maybe. Is that right? Maybe for the Bat Cruise?
I would if I could. Unfortunately,
okay.
I am way too busy and way too far away and way too skint.
All right. So we'll chalk up Richard as a strong maybe. So that's coming up August 16th at 7 p.m. Tickets are selling quickly, so get yours today and join people like Tim B., April W., and Gabriel, who already have their tickets. If you're not able to attend, you can still help out by donating underneath the live chat to purchase a ticket for one of our hosts or crew. So visit tiny.cc/batcruise to get your tickets, and we'll see you on the boat. I will definitely be there, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's a good opportunity to meet many of the cast and crew members of our shows, and it's always fun meeting people who like the shows. And so if you feel like seeing some cool bat stuff, then come on down and join us for that. That's August 16th, 7 p.m. Also, a great way to support us is by sending super chats. So get them in, and we'll read as many as you can. Today I want to focus our super chats on shouting out, giving some love out to all of our ACA members and showcast and crew that are out at NanoCon in Tennessee today. And so we have a lot of people out there. And so if you want to send a super chat hug to one of them, feel free, and we'll read it on the air here. Also, if you're in Austin, you can join our weekly watch parties at the Free Thought Library on Sundays for live viewings of Talk Heathen and the Atheist Experience. Every Sunday, doors open at noon. It's a great place for building community. And lastly, you can follow Talk Heathen on TikTok, Talk Heathen, and join us for our pre-shows live at the ACA TikTok Atheist Community of Austin. And I think Richard was even on there right before the show, trying to drum up a little bit of business for us there on TikTok. What kind of response? I'm curious, Richard. I'm not really much of a TikToker. So what kind of interaction, what kind of feedback do you get from TikTokers about the shows?
Yeah, you know what? We have the people who pop into those pre-shows are great. They really are. We have sometimes the theists want to do the lives on there, and you can generally prompt them. We're not taking lives at the moment, but they can call the show. We've got quite a few calls from those pre-show TikToks, but the interaction is great. The fans of the show put messages in there, and I'll read them out if they're appropriate to do so. And it's great interaction. I love doing those. You get to meet the people who are fans of the show, very often show their appreciation. Mm-hmm. And it's, I love that. I love interacting with the people who support us and who are fans and who want to watch these conversations unfold. Right. I love it.
Cool. All right. Yeah, I got to get involved with that. I'm getting way behind the curve here on this whole technology thing, but someday I'll catch back up, I think. But we do have some more callers on the line here. Let's talk next to, we have Michelle, she, her, from New York, a theist, wants to talk about the God question. Would we know supernatural apart from alien or future tech? Michelle, how are you doing today?
Doing very well, Mr. Dickie and Mr. Gilliver.
Well, what's on your mind about the God question here today?
I've been a fan of the shows around on YouTube that discuss this question quite a bit. And I see a lot of enthusiasm over the years from the hosts, still have that core enthusiasm. Can I mention some of these shows? Is that okay if they're on your line? And the other one? Can I mention?
What about just describe the enthusiasm that you're talking about? Enthusiasm about talking about the God question?
Enthusiasm about continuing, does God exist?
Okay.
Because, you guys have been so hammered by the same old arguments. If someone's not going to the teleological, they're going to the ontological, or it's some inane thing. And for the life of me, I can't really think of any good evidence other than, I would say maybe the myriad of life that exists on Earth and all the numbers that went in and everything, the physics, just everything. It just seems to me more likely that God. It doesn't seem to me more likely that Big Bang.
Michelle, you are a theist, so you presumably you have been persuaded by this stuff. So what is it specific? What is it specifically that has persuaded you? Michelle, are you there?
With us, Michelle?
I'm here. That's good. No, I'm here. That's a good question, Mr. Gilliver. No, I didn't pronounce it correctly. I'm sorry, Mr. Gilliver. I'm sorry, I'm totally butchering your name there.
It's fine.
But there's been a lot of things that have persuaded me. Would they persuade anybody else? I don't think so. So why share them?
Do you think that they should persuade you? Are they things that you think should be persuasive to you?
They have me not convinced, but they have me a little bit in faith. Yeah. And
So that wasn't my question. My question was, do you think the things that persuade you, do you think that they should be persuasive to you?
They seem to be they seem to be making me believe, so I can't just simply excuse them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of reasons that people believe. We know that confidence and belief is an emotional response. When you have confidence in something that was said or that you hear, that's an emotional response. And we all know that emotions can come about for bad reasons. Maybe we get angry at somebody because we're hungry or tired, or because for whatever reason, maybe something bad happened earlier that day. So we know that emotions can come about for bad reasons. And so I think it's important to examine those reasons. If there's something in your life that's convincing you to believe that a God exists, it's really a red flag to me when I hear somebody say, well, there's this thing and it convinces me, but it's not going to convince anybody else. And so to me, that's saying you don't necessarily accept that it should be persuasive. Are you being persuaded by for a good reason? Do you think that you believe for a good reason, or do you think maybe you have some of these other responses? Maybe you were raised to be religious. Maybe you're in a religious setting now. There could be, maybe you had some kind of difficulty in your life, so you were vulnerable at a particular time and you adopted this. Your mind associates a change in your life with the adoption of a religious belief. Do you think that the reasons that are convincing to you are good? And if you don't think that they're good reasons, do you think that maybe you should rethink?
I'll give you one reason I think is decent. Not good, but decent. The Earth is how big compared to the sun? The Earth, I always forget how many times it can fit inside the center of the sun if the sun was hollow. And literally, the Earth is it's much less than the size of a basketball compared to the sun. Yet we're in a perfect orbit around the sun to elicit nice temperate weather in the most densely populated areas.
Mm-hmm.
Scott Dickie, the mathematician, would you like to address this, which clearly falls into the law of very large numbers?
I mean, I would just say gravity. Is that what you're talking about? You're saying that gravity is a reason to believe, or are you talking about like how the Earth is in quote unquote the Goldilocks zone? Is that what you're looking at there, or what? I'm not really entirely sure what it is you were saying was your reason to believe.
Not only the Goldilocks zone, but also the sheer size of the sun compared to the Earth. I mean, the Earth is less than the size of a basketball. How do they get
the Earth obviously is not less than the size of a basketball, but I think what you mean is that it's very, if the sun was represented by like, a beach ball or something, then maybe the Earth would be the size of a marble. Or is that kind of what you're saying? So there's things out there that are bigger than the Earth. Is that the argument that I'm hearing here?
But so tangentially bigger than the Earth, so tangentially, so grandiose. I mean, the universe seems like something that's grandiose, like it's all, and everything was all set in place just so. So at this time, we apes could rise up on our legs and keep saying, whoa, this stuff keeps amazing us, no matter.
I think what Richard was alluding to earlier with the idea of large numbers is that there's lots and lots of big stars out there, And in the grand scheme of things, our star really isn't all that amazing. It's really not all that spectacular, and it's not even really all that big. But there's going to be lots of stars out there that have planets surrounding them, that many of them are in the Goldilocks zone. There are scientists today that are looking for that kind of thing. They found lots and lots of planets out there. Why do you, why you would think that life turning out this way, you could even argue that it's almost inevitable. And so if that's the case, how would that lead you to the existence of a God? I mean, it seems to me like the argument you're trying to make, and please correct me if I'm wrong, this solar system is just so awesome, there must be a God. Is that kind of what your argument is?
But not just the solar system. I'm talking about the whole cosmos. I mean, we got things floating around in our space that are called black holes. I mean, okay. But that's there just because.
And so that's also a product of gravity. So gravity's a thing.
So gravity's just there just because. Gravity's just there just because. We need it to function, and it's just there just because. We are serious.
Michelle, earlier in the call, you said that you thought God was more likely than the Big Bang. You've done a lot of talking about space and the universe. Is it that you don't accept the Big Bang at all, or is it that you are?
No.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to clarify. So what? Why did you mention you thought God was more likely than the Big Bang? Then, what specifically about that?
I mean, like, I think how he did it was through the Big Bang. Like when God said, "Let there be light," Big Bang. Light emanating and going out from one source to the ends of the cosmos, and it's still continuing, speeding up.
You do know that the guy who came, I mentioned this on the show a couple of weeks ago, it seems to be like my main talking point recently. The guy who actually came up, the Catholic priest who came up with the Big Bang Theory, actually rejected this idea that it was done through God, don't you? There was a kind of the Pope Pius came out and said that God had created the universe through the Big Bang, and the Big Bang was evidence for God's existence. And Lemaitre, who was the guy who came up with the Big Bang Theory, said, no, this is not the case. He says, I disagree with that sentiment. We should separate the science from religious faith, and we shouldn't be making statements like that. What do you know that the guy who came up with the Big Bang Theory himself rejected?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, do I agree? Do I disagree? Does it change my position at all? I would have to think about it. I'm not going to say that I'm going to change my position based on that solely alone. Though
That's
I
not what
would
he was
say,
asking. Richard was asking is what's different about what you know than what he knows? Do you know something that he doesn't?
Probably no. He probably knows a whole lot. The guy probably knows a whole lot more than I do. I'm just a layman, and if that. But that was my opinion. And if a God that was even less than maximally powerful had the ability to create a universe or dimension or realm or more than one of them and wanted to and decided to, he most certainly could. And if he wanted to do it via Big Bang, he most certainly could if he could. So why is that excuse my argument altogether?
Right, but that can only be true if God exists. If God doesn't exist, then God can't do any of those things.
Right, I agree with you.
Okay, so do you think that is an important point? I mean, we're talking about taking the universe, which you have, some knowledge, but using your own words, you're not, much less than say, Lemaitre did. So do you think that's good to then go on to that next step and say, oh, well, then it must be God? I mean, do you think it's, because I haven't noticed in any of the things that you've said, none of the sentences that you've said have ended in therefore God. And so it sounds like you're just trying to talk about a situation and then to feel comfortable about the conclusion you've already made. And I apologize if I'm mischaracterizing what I'm hearing here, but please clarify if that's not the case. Are you looking to justify a belief you already hold for irrational reasons? Are you trying to kind of wedge something in there?
No, definitely not. You'll have to forgive me. I'm running on not much sleep and a lot of coffee, so I'm a little loosey-goosey at the moment. So if I'm lacking a certain decorum, please, forgive me.
What is it anyway, about? What is Michelle? Sorry for interrupting, but what is it about this idea that God set the Big Bang into motion? What is it that makes you think that's the case? If you were to say someone, I think that God created the Big Bang, set the Big Bang into the motion, set everything into motion, and I think this because. What explanation would you give for that because?
Right, yeah.
Because he loved us, he wanted us to be here, because he knew we wanted to be here, no matter how much we had to suffer to get here, and all the grueling and the suffering that we have to endure day by day, not to mention all the children who die of hunger each day. I mean,
God
could save.
It's a story. It's a story that makes you satisfy. Is it because it's a story that you like? Is that what you're saying? Because your reasons for believing in God, that you're just, the way you just answered Richard's question is because he does this. So the answer that you gave presupposes the existence of a God. And so if you are actually trying to justify that belief, you don't start by already believing it. Do you see the fallacy there?
Yes.
Do you have a problem with that? Do you think holding very important beliefs, and if you're a theist, I'm assuming that you feel that your beliefs in your God are important in your life. Do you think that you should approach that kind of belief in such kind of a slapdash way, or do you think that that's acceptable to you?
Well, let me ask you a question. Why is supposing or presupposing, when it comes to scientific method, that there is no God, and therefore trying to prove you're wrong via that direction, is that okay? But when I say when I presuppose the God, whoa, you can't do that, man.
What do you mean? So who's presupposing there's no God here?
The atheists.
Which atheists? You're talking to two of them here. I don't presuppose that. I think I can speak for Richard. I don't think he comes into it presupposing that there's no God.
So so when you say you're not convinced, are you presupposing that you're not convinced, or are you supposing that you're not convinced? Because
it's an observation of one's own inner state. I mean, we can all say things with relative certainty about our own psychological state. If I'm not convinced, I can recognize that. If I'm not sure, I can recognize that. If I am convinced, I can recognize that. It's if you're asking us, are we presupposing our own psychological state? That, to me, that's kind of a ridiculous question. Do you see why?
Yes.
Do you care to rephrase your question?
No, because so you really botched the holes in it, and you got a bazooka there. You picked it up. You got a bazooka. You picked it up, and you fired it through my argument. And God damn it, I feel quite naked right now. Well, I'm in my birthday suit because of that bazooka you just fired at me. But I'm having fun in this call, guys. You guys have treated me nicely. Thank you. I feel like I butchered all my art. You guys have treated me nicely.
Yeah, go. I think Michelle, go and get some rest, so you don't have to keep running on coffee to talk to us. Have a think about the call. Yeah. Listen back to the call. Have a think about it, and when you've kind of had a good think about it, give us a call back and kind of let's follow it up and see where you go from here.
Yeah.
All right.
Sure
Yeah,
thing,
thanks so
guys.
much for your call, Michelle. We really appreciate you calling in. I enjoyed the talk here.
Yep. Bye-bye.
All right. We do have a couple more calls on the line here, but before we do that, I would like to address our top patrons of the week. Richard, would you care to read off our top patrons this week?
I would like to very much, yes. The top 5 patrons for this week are Oops, all singularity, Deanne Kearns, Dinglebury Jackson, Kalevi Helvete, and J.A. Carlton. J.A. Carlton. Honourable mention goes to number 6. People of a certain age in Britain will remember an advert and know exactly why I said that like
right.
that. Honourable mention goes to number 6. Number 6, cyber_squirrel. Thank you to everybody who supports us on Patreon. And if you want your name read on there, please do consider supporting us at tiny.cc/PatreonTH. And we do record for the patrons, for the paid patrons specifically and exclusively, we do record the Talk Heathen after shows. So if you don't have Discord, if you don't get over there, if you don't get a chance to go over there and you want to hear those after shows, you can do by becoming a paid patron member at any level, and we get into some really good conversations over there and get some really good insights into the different subjects. We often follow up on what we've been talking about and go into more detail. We very often share links to studies and things that relate to the stuff we've been talking about, and you get to know a little bit more about the hosts as well. The hosts very often share, details that they don't share on air. So it's a really cool place to be. So you can come and join us live after the show in Discord, or you can, if you want to listen to them after the fight, you just join Patreon, and you get to listen to all of the after shows there as well.
All right. Thank you, Richard. And before we move on here, I see that we do have a few super chats that have come in. Although I'm not seeing all of the text here. We have Narcissa for $19.99 with no comment. So thank you, Narcissa, for the donation there. We really appreciate that. We also have a super chat from Miranda Rensberger, who's been a member of 1 year, a very big fan of ours, for $10. I've broken a commandment because I'm jealous of the people who got to go to NanaCon, but Richard could get to the Bat Cruise if he starts swimming now. That's a very good point, Richard. It's a matter of gumption on
you
your
will not
part.
find me in the sea. Look, there's things that live in there that you can eat. I don't go in that. I'm quite happy to go on the sea, in boats, but I'm not going in the sea. You'll not find me in there. So I'm swimming nowhere. Sorry, man.
I'm pretty sure we have boats that cover that distance too. I'm pretty sure we have that. But yeah, we also have a super chat from Truth666. Member of 1 year, a donation for $19.99 there. I don't see any comment there. So Truth666, thank you for that donation. And another one here. This might be a repeat of Narcissa's from earlier here. For $19.99, Narcissa says, LOL, I'm in a lot of sciatic pain right now. I'm going to have a smoke, and in an hour is my next pill. Love being here with you damn heathens. Well, we love having you here. I'm sorry to hear about your back pain there. I'm an old man, so I definitely have a small hint of maybe what you're feeling there. So take care of yourself, and then come back and listen to some more heathenry here, right on the Talk Heathen show. Before we have a couple other calls here, Richard, but I wanted to, you talked us up about talking about the resurrection here. And so I want us to at least address that a little bit. I see we have one caller in the queue here who wants to talk about the resurrection of Jesus, but I just wanted to get a little hint, a little taster of, you mentioned that you had an argument against the resurrection of Jesus. And I wonder if you can kind of sum that up for us here, just to kind of give some, maybe we can kind of grease the wheels on some Christian callers who are just about ready to call, but they're not quite sure. What do you have to say to that?
Yeah, it's not an argument against the resurrection as such. It's an argument from psychology that we have explanations for. Even if we take every single gospel account as eyewitness and accurate. I don't think we can. But even if we extended that out to the theist and said, right, we're going to accept them as eyewitnesses, we're going to say, yes, they were definitely there. Every single aspect of the gospel accounts that talk about the resurrections, every single one of them has aspects in it that psychology can explain. So different fields of psychology have done lots of work in not specifically of studying the resurrection. I'd like to see a paper that does talk about this, but in lots of different fields of resurrection, lots of work's been done, very important work that addresses real life issues. Some of them relate to kind of eyewitnesses and call into question whether that's a good thing to have in courts of law or how they're treated in the courts of law. Some of them relate to trauma and how we respond to trauma. All of these different psychological fields, when we apply the work that's been done and the work that is accepted by the consensus of experts in those fields, what we find is that when we apply those to the resurrection accounts, it actually explains all of those things that those eyewitnesses, if we're to take them as eyewitnesses, go through. And it actually gives an explanation that these people might believe this to be true because of X. And we have that for every single aspect of the resurrection accounts.
Right. And, I also have somewhat of an argument here, and it's kind of building on what you were talking about. Mine is regarding the idea. So we're looking at what we're really trying to decide is, okay, we have this story about the resurrection. We want to decide, is the story correct or is it not correct? And you've been talking about various psychological phenomena that can explain maybe reasons why people might have thought that or why they might have believed that. I want to look at it from more of a mathematical perspective. Some of you might know that during my day job, I'm a math teacher. And specifically, I want to look at something. Whenever I hear a Christian make an argument for the resurrection, my first question to them is always the same. It's always, how did you determine that a supernatural explanation was more likely than a more mundane explanation? Or sometimes they'll phrase their statement so that it's not really about a miracle. It's just about the resurrection in general. And again, I would adjust my question. How can you justify the claim that an actual resurrection happening, that the story was true, is more likely than the other possibilities, that the myriad of ways that they could be wrong? And they always give me answers like, well, they were strongly motivated to tell the truth. Or I want to read a specific, and I don't want to straw man my interlocutors here. So I want to read just one response here that I was given. These, let's see. Establishing that the resurrection happened and less concerned with establishing that it was a miracle, but against the idea that it was wrong, there are several issues. These come from the fact that the resurrection is multiply attested. The witnesses demonstrated a willingness to die for their belief in the resurrection, so lying is off the table. Red flag number one. And the character of the testimony is such that it would be nearly impossible to be honestly mistaken about touching Jesus or eating with him in a group setting. Flag number two here. These points collectively rule out the story being wrong. And my argument is, well, obviously they don't rule out the story being wrong. At best, what they can do is argue that the story is very unlikely to be wrong. But what I want to point out here is that is a prior probability. And if you want some more details about the type of argument that I'm giving, I thought that Dr. Blitz was on the Atheist Experience last week, and I thought gave a very, very nice application of this kind of argument. What I'm saying is, in order for you to say that and the resurrection actually happening, you need to show that it's more likely than the alternatives. And you can't just say, well, the alternatives are unlikely, so this is the only other possibility, so it must be likely. I could make that same argument from the other side. I could say, well, going into it, we know that at best, resurrection has happened I don't know, 0 times that I can see. But even if we grant that it's happened a few times, even if we grant that all the other resurrection stories in the Bible were correct, that's what, 5 people out of 100 billion people that have lived on Earth. And so if we're talking about prior probabilities, if you're saying that the stories are unlikely to be wrong for X, Y, and Z reasons, I can also say, well, resurrection is actually also very, very unlikely, and therefore the alternative must be likely. So by using that same approach from 2 different sides of the argument, you get conflicting results. And that tells you that there's a problem with the way that you're applying that method. If the same method can lead you to contradictory results, then the problem is in your assumptions, is in your approach. And I think that if you approach it with that in mind, that prior probability, then it really falls apart. It really falls apart. And so I would love to go into that deeper, but I know we have some calls that have been waiting, and I want to make sure that we get to those. So I think we'll go next to Luke, is he, him in Canada, is a theist, and says that the resurrection of Jesus is important or is not important. I'm assuming that you're responding to our poll question in the chat today. Was that, Luke, are you with us here? Can you maybe expand on what you want to talk about the resurrection of Jesus? All right, I'm going to return Luke to the queue here. Then we do have another caller on the line. This is Tucker, Agnostic from Iowa. Tucker's a friend of the show here, so we're well familiar with talking to Tucker. Tucker, what's on your mind today?
Hi, guys. So Richard and I have been emailing over the last couple of weeks, and he believed that calling the show again would be beneficial. So here I am.
Okay. Well, I understand that you want to talk about, because you label yourself as an agnostic, but you don't believe in a God, but you have other supernatural beliefs. Is that kind of what the direction you wanted to take this?
Yeah, I am. I don't actively seek out supernatural experiences, but I am open to them.
Okay.
Because of experiences that I have had in the past.
And so does that lead you to, would you say that you have a supernatural belief? Is that what you want to talk about? Or do you want to talk about your approach to dealing with these experiences? Or both?
Well, Richard said that he thought that it would be beneficial for me to call and let him lead me through I guess examining my openness to supernatural things.
Let's try to find, pick a concrete point to start at. Can you name one supernatural belief that you hold that you'd like to examine today?
Well, no, not specifically, because I don't. Like I said, I don't seek them out actively. Mm-hmm. I'm just open to them if and when they happen.
Okay, well, let's do a hypothetical then here. Let's say we come across somebody who says that they believe that they can speak to their dead relatives. Okay,
so I understand. Remember. Okay.
I understand that in the past you've felt attacked by other skeptics, and that's kind of what I thought you were interested in addressing today. And if you want to, we can. And if we don't want to, that's fine.
No.
But what if you came across such a person? How would you interact with that person? What would you talk to them about? How could you examine their belief?
First of all, I am. No, I don't feel attacked.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, good. I'm glad. I'm glad that I was wrong about that.
that's the conversation that I tried to have with you and Christy a few weeks ago. Because
well, the impression I got that you felt like you weren't being treated fairly, and whether or not that happened may or may not be relevant here, but what I want to look at specifically is I was under the impression, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that you were unhappy with the interaction, and I think that can be good. That can be a good example. I don't think that you're alone if that's the case, if that's the way you were feeling. I don't feel that you're alone. I would imagine that when interacting with self-professed skeptics, it can be challenging or even isolating if you're somebody who has a belief that you feel you can't justify, or that you classify as a supernatural belief, or maybe feel like you're not getting a fair shake. If that's not the case, then that's fine. What do you think would be a good way to approach that? Let's say you did come up to somebody who had a supernatural belief. How would you interact with them? Even if we want to take this completely separate from your personal situation, do you have any recommendations, or what would you think would be a productive way of interacting with somebody who has a belief that you think is not rationally held?
so, yeah, I'm not against talking to you, Scott, but where's Richard? Where is Richard?
Richard's with us here.
I'm right here.
Is he
I'm just
not
listening
here?
to the conversation. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. I called in response to your suggestion that I call, and you said to walk me through. So
I asked you to call when you were ready to call and kind of have these conversations about your supernatural experiences. And if you are ready for those conversations, we can have that conversation. If you're not ready for those conversations, that's fine as well. As I said to you in the emails, there's no pressure to call if you're not ready to call, if you're not ready to have those conversations. But if you do want those conversations, if you feel you are ready to share those supernatural experiences, or some of those supernatural experiences, and let us examine them and walk through them, then we can do that. But you have to want to do that and be ready to do that.
I guess I must have misunderstood your intention then.
Go on. Sorry, Scott.
I was just going to say there's a couple of different relevant points here that I think are valuable for us to look at. First of all, we want to examine, can a skeptic have an irrational belief? Another thing would be, how can that skeptic interact with other skeptics, re that particular belief? And is it important to do so in a way that is not name calling and not pointing fingers and not laughing? Is it important to do that in a way to be more productive? I mean, there's a few different routes that we can take with this call. If you'd like to address any of those things today, we certainly can. And if you would rather we talk a different time or in a different context, that we can do that as well. I mean, we want to explore some thoughts that you might be having, and we're not really sure what those thoughts are.
Okay, so I misunderstood the basic thrust of what Richard had in mind. So I'm going to let you guys go. Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, I hope that we can pick this up again at some other time when you're feeling a little bit more solid in what it is that you want to talk about. So thanks, Tucker, for calling in. Any thoughts on that, Richard? Any reflection on that interaction there?
I love the fact that Tucker was confident enough to bring to the table that this all started, and I don't want to kind of say too much because they've gone, and I don't want to say things that they're not here to respond to. this all started because they were unhappy, as I understood it, with an interaction that had taken place with, I believe it was you and Christy, on the show, and the way you'd responded to Tucker, and they had the confidence to contact us, and we've had a conversation about that. And my suggestion to them was, when you are ready to call the show to discuss those things, please feel free, if you are ever ready to call the show and discuss those things, give us a call and let's kind of walk through them, because I think it's much more beneficial to have the conversation on air, on the show, than it is kind of behind closed doors, as it were, because it allows for... First of all, it allows for it's a recorded conversation. It's a conversation you can go, and this doesn't just apply to Tucker. This applies to anybody. Mm-hmm. It's a recorded conversation that you can go back. You'll have heard me tonight to suggest to one of the callers, go back and listen to the call. It's something that you can go back and listen to and digest the information that you can't always do in the heat of the moment when you're having a conversation. And secondly, because it can also be very beneficial to other people who might also be going through the same thing as you are. So someone might be listening to the show and say, that applies to me. That's really helpful for me as well. And I think it's much more beneficial to have those conversations in this space than it is kind of via email or and anybody's welcome to message the show and email the show and raise concerns, and that's fine. I welcome people doing that. And as Tucker says, we've had these emails. I understand that Tucker's spoken to you as well, and about that call that was made that they weren't happy with, and I think that's great, and I think Tucker was very brave to do that, and take that step in, raising those concerns. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what Tucker misunderstood, what they thought I meant to call for today. I'm a little confused about that myself, but
I'll tell you what I think about when I talk to Tucker, or when I hear calls that they're calling in on, I see somebody who is, first of all, curious. Okay. Somebody who is wanting to understand things, who's wanting to learn. And to me, that's a prime quality there. That's a, in my eyes, that's a virtuous quality, the idea of wanting to learn, wanting to know things. And I also see somebody who is not only struggling with their own beliefs, they're also struggling with ways to convey those beliefs. That can be also a challenge as well. And also to understand one's own perception and one's own experiences. And so, so my hat's off to you, Tucker, for being brave enough, as Richard was saying, being brave enough to take that step into our little spotlight here, and putting yourself out there and having these discussions, because there's lots of people that are confused about their own beliefs. There's lots of people who are having difficulty resolving those beliefs with other things that they might believe about the world, and also having difficulties communicating those beliefs as well. And so just the fact that you're attacking what you see is an issue in your mind, rather than glossing it over and pushing it to the side, that's, to me, that's a big step. So I really appreciate that.
And we've seen that today as well with when Cows Are Friends call. Right. When someone, when we walk through people's beliefs with them, it is exactly to provide that scaffolding for them to say, right, I can climb this tower, I can examine this brickwork for myself, and I can see that it is, in fact, it's a little bit shoddy and I didn't understand that before. So let me now do that work. And I think that's very, very important. I think it's very important to do, and I think it's very important to want to do. Our callers are at lots of different stages of their journey.
Right,
and I think we've got to acknowledge that. Anyway, we need to get to this last call. So let's try Luke again. theist from Canada who wants to talk about the resurrection,
Luke.
resurrection of Jesus.
Is it better now?
Oh, we can
better
hear you,
now,
Luke.
yes.
All right,
Hello.
welcome.
Yeah, the guy at the holding told me that there was something about my microphone. I'm sorry about that. So yeah, I heard you well, correctly the way before, and the reason I called was because of the question that was in the chat. Well, does it matter that Jesus resurrect? That was the question that was in the YouTube chat.
Yeah. So I see that you're a theist. Should we assume that you are a Christian?
Yeah, who's that? That's Scott, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Hi, Scott. We talked, Richard and me. I think we already talked before. So I'm a Catholic, and so I'm a theist, and yes, it does matter. I would have been Catholic.
So why does it matter? Why does that make a difference? I mean, I can understand why it might affect your, the depth or the breadth of your religious belief, but why does it matter in general, like to the world?
So resurrection is what allows us to know that God won against death. So, the reason why Jesus died and resurrected is because of our sins, right? So to signify this victory against sin, we need this resurrection. If it was death and no resurrection, you would have something missing, a show of victory, something that proves that death is not the end. You understand?
I get. So it's like a kind of a victory lap kind of thing, or maybe like a cosmic flexing, right? Just saying, look at what I can do kind of thing.
More like a score. And when you have like I hit the middle of the in the cible en français. I don't know how to say that in English. I don't remember the word now. But you fly an arrow right in the middle of the, what's the thing that you fly the arrow to? Anyway.
Not sure.
You have to have a way to measure that you indeed did what you do.
Okay, so it's kind of like a fulfillment of big talk that came a little bit earlier, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So Jesus said, I'm going to win against sin. This is why I die. And because I'm going to win, sin will not win. And I will take all of your sins and win against them.
Sure.
And that's how you know that he won. If he didn't persecute, you wouldn't know.
Let's cut to the chase here. I'm going to ask you if you have any good reason to believe that this resurrection actually happened. And I already, we kind of already showed our hands a little bit earlier. I'm going to ask you, how do you know that it's more likely that it actually happened than the stories are just wrong? And so, what are your thoughts on that?
You have the reason why I believe it is the case is because every time I have this conversation with people who don't believe it is the case, they are presenting me what it could be, right? They are claiming that it is more likely that this was what happened. For example, you said psychology explained that people will do that in that way, and this is more likely to be the case. I'm like, no, it doesn't make it more likely. Every aspect is explainable, but psychology is a claim that is unfalsifiable. Right now, there is nothing that could falsify
why is it less likely? Why is it less likely that somebody who has that psychology, which has explained these things, these are real world examples. For example, one of the things that I've kind of applied to this criteria is the study of memory. These are real applicable things. It's the study of memory. It's not just talking to people like the old idea of psychology is. Psychology these days takes in a lot of neuroscience as well. It's not just a case of talking through stuff like it used to be. They take into account neuroscience. They look at how the brain actually functions and operates. And in memory studies, a consistent They are consistent. One of the kind of heavyweights of memory studies is Elizabeth Loftus. She has done so much work in this field of memory study. Her student was herself gone on to become a massively prominent psychologist in the field of memory study, Julia Shaw. She works with police departments. She works with police departments so that they can kind of cater their interviewing techniques so they're not falsely implementing memories into people. This isn't just stuff that's unfalsifiable. This is stuff which is both works, we know we can correlate it to the actual way the brain works through kind of neuroscience, and it is stuff which is applied on the ground in lots of different fields. So it's not just a case of saying, no, well, psychology disproves the resurrection, and I accept it. This stuff works. It works again and again and again. And when we apply those fields of study, those experiments, we can see that people in traumatic situations, for example, people who suffer traumatic things are likely to misremember. So if we are taking the gospel writers as eyewitnesses, even if we just accept that they're eyewitnesses and don't even have the conversation about that they might not be, then we can apply this psychological kind of methodology to it, and we can see that, well, if they were in that situation and they've suffered a traumatic experience, they are likely to misremember. There is so many studies done on the ground. There was a study done, I think it was by Elizabeth Loftus and her team and a couple of other psychologists, where they actually studied the aftermath of a train crash. I think it was a subway crash in New York. And everybody there who witnessed it, all of the eyewitnesses who they were talked to were themselves professionals in their field. There were people who worked on the trains every day. There were police officers who were used to doing this sort of stuff, who, taking in this information. And they found that it was a traumatic event, and they found that they misremembered. They found that they had misremembered it. We've got other aspects like, for example, lots of people witnessing the same thing. Theists will often argue that that's evidence that this is true. This adds weight to the evidence that this is true. And once more, in psychological studies, again and again, we find that multiple eyewitnesses aren't necessarily better. It's not the case that they're necessarily better. So it's not just a case of saying, well, psychology is unfalsifiable and this is more likely, because what we've got is a claim that somebody has risen from the dead. We have never had one single in the history of medical science, we have not had one single confirmed case of people coming back from legal death. Whereas when we've got these psychological studies, we've got time and time and time again, this stuff has been verified, it's been put into practice, and we know that this is true. So just on that basis alone, taking out anything else from it, I don't see how you can possibly say it's more likely that Jesus rose from the dead than these psychological studies are talking, have got it right. Because these psychological studies have got it right. This has been found time and time again, and we've never had an example of someone coming back from legal death. How do you make that connection that it is more likely that Jesus rose from the dead, that this is a cognitive mistake made by people? Explain your reasoning. Talk through your reasoning to me.
And I want to, before you do that, though, Luke, I just want to sharpen a point that Richard was making. I'm going to stand on the shoulders of this particular giant here by me, Richard Gilliver. There's probably a Gilliver's Travels joke in there, but I'm going to stand on the giant shoulders of Richard. And so what he was saying is that we know that some of these phenomena are possible. There's a long recorded history and scientific investigation of these different types, people misremembering things, people adopting other people's memories, people being influenced by strongly held beliefs that were, from beforehand and that kind of thing. So we know that these kind of things can happen. And so when you say that we're saying that psychology proves that the resurrection didn't happen. No, that's not what we're saying. We're not saying psychology proves the resurrection didn't or can't happen. What we're saying is we have an explanation for this story. We know that the kind of things that happen in our explanation can happen. Now, what I want to ask you is, do you have any reason to believe that, or any reason that we should believe that the explanation that it really was a resurrection is more likely? By saying that our explanation is extremely unlikely, the quote that I read earlier from a Facebook poster was saying that it even goes so far as to saying it's impossible, which I think is obviously ridiculous, because we know these things can happen. How is it more likely that the resurrection actually happened is a better explanation, because we don't even know if that's even possible. We know these psychological phenomena are possible. We know that they happen fairly frequently. Okay. And even in the case of people that have religious belief, they would also agree that religious beliefs that other people have are also wrong. So you would agree, I would think, please correct me if I'm wrong, that people can make strongly held religious beliefs, can make statements based on those beliefs and be wrong about them. So given the fact that we know the story could be wrong, how can you come to the conclusion that it's more likely, a better explanation, that the resurrection actually happened? And to do that, you can't knock down our side. You can do that all you want. You're not going to be able to prove it's impossible, because we have hard evidence that it's possible. So what you need to do is take your side of the argument there and raise it up. Do you have any way that you can do that? And I'll stop talking here and give you a chance to respond.
Luke, are you there?
Are you with us, Luke?
Yes, I am still here. So
okay.
The point that Richard pointed out, it goes with the claim that I made, which was the reason why I'm pointing it out is because your claim, they misremembered what happened, is an unfalsifiable claim. There are other claims, like Scott, you asked me, that could go towards it being more likely than not. The resurrection being more likely to be true than not more likely. But the main reason why I am seeing this in this conversation is that all the claims that I receive from the atheist side, they are unfalsifiable. There is no way to falsify their position. Right now, there's nothing that you can do.
You'd cover a lot of ground in doing that by proving the resurrection occurred.
There is no way for me to give you evidence of something that will falsify the claim or the claim that you made. So misremembrance, that word having trouble repeating. The fact that we cannot remember correctly things, it will always be there. There is no way to say, we have the proof that they remembered correctly the resurrection. There is nothing.
Well, just because you can't prove what Richard said was wrong doesn't mean it's unfalsifiable.
Yeah,
that just means that you can't falsify it.
We cannot interview the people who witnessed the resurrection. We don't have direct access to them. But what we can do is we can take what we do know from psychology, the things that we do know the human brain does, and we can apply it after the fact to these resurrection accounts. And we can say, is it possible that in this situation, this person misremembered? Well, yes, we can. If we apply that psychology to that, we can do that. We can say, for want of not being able to interview the person directly, we can look at the evidence that we do have, the testimony that we do have in the gospel, and apply it to that. And can we say, is it possible that after a traumatic event, this person misremembered what they have since related and is now in the gospel? And the answer is yes, we can. It is possible that occurred. As Scott said, this doesn't prove the resurrection didn't happen, but what it does do is it gives us a good argument to say that account of the resurrection is not reliable. We can say for a fact that account is not reliable. So if that is not reliable, let's put that aside as evidence for the resurrection, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but many, many theists do use the gospel accounts as evidence for the resurrection. Let's put that aside and let's say, right, that's not evidence for the resurrection. What else is there? What else have we got? What is evidence for the resurrection?
Yeah. What I'm again, what would constitute evidence for it? You say memory is not evidence because we can have false memory, and we have evidence that the brain does create false memory.
That's not what he said.
Correctly what you said.
That's not what he said.
Okay.
What he said was, what the psychology tells us is that we have a possibility. We at least have a possibility that this could explain the stories, that the people that these psychological phenomena, misremembered memories, etc. We know that this is possible. We have evidence that we have clinical evidence that this kind of thing can happen. Okay. And so
are you sure you're talking about
what we're saying is,
that were there 2,000 years ago?
Say that again.
Are you sure you're talking about brain of people that were there 2,000 years ago? Your evidence, is it based on things that happened 2,000 years ago, or is it based on things that happened 100 years ago?
We're assuming that's the psychology of a human being is roughly the same. Do you think that's an unreasonable assumption?
Correct.
If you think that's an unreasonable assumption, then your entire thought process goes out the window, because then we have no way of interpreting what those people wrote. If we can't come to grips, if we can't accept there is at least some basis of common psychology, we have no way of addressing what they've said. Now, if that's your claim, then you're off in the chaos. You're off floating in the ether with no argument for anything. You can't make an argument towards anything based off of that, because you're admitting, there's no way of us knowing. So if you're saying that it's unreasonable for us to make assumptions about the psychology of people 2,000 years ago, you are severely undercutting anything in the Bible. Is that your intention?
So right now, Scott, the trouble I'm having is about this specific claim about an event that happened and how we misremember an event that happened. It is not a claim about other kind of psychology behavior that happens 2,000 years ago. I'm talking about this specific one. Okay. Do you understand the difference?
So what's the difference between this specific claim about misremembering and other psychological fields and other psychological aspects? Why do you think, if you think this, why do you think that might be different from between us and people living 2,000 years ago, whereas other aspects of psychology might not be different between us and people who lived 2,000 years ago?
Okay. So, for example, somebody who is claiming something that they remember and they're remembering false, in 2,000 years from now, in the place of Jesus, they were possible to death. The lie or the misremembering has a consequence of death at the time.
How do you think that affects what you're saying? If they were being threatened with death, now you're saying that we can't know anything about the psychology of these people. So what does adding the threat of death to anything? How does that affect anything that you're saying? Because now you can't say, well, they would be honest because they didn't want to die. There you're making assumptions about psychology.
Wait, Scott, I'm sorry, but when I asked, do we agree that it is about the specific case and not in general? And then in your question right now, you said something about psychology in general. I feel we are not on the same page right now.
But we have to talk about psychology in general, because when we're talking about, you've just brought another aspect of psychology into it, because you didn't talk about memory. What you said was, well, if people believe something and they might be killed for that belief, that's going into a different area of psychology. So you can't bring a different area of psychology into it and then expect us not to talk about different areas of psychology and insist we only talk about this one. So are we talking about the memory of people 2,000 years ago, or are we talking about a wider psychological perspective from 2,000 years ago?
Unless you have a reason to think that people back then were different in one way and not different in another way, which I'm guessing might be difficult a case to make there.
That's what I talked to you. That is the point, Scott. I think that was Scott who intervened at the end. So the point I'm making is that they have similar points that we do in psychology today, but they have a different point. One of those points is about the claim that they make based on memory. Right now, today, or 100 years from now, when you have a false claim about memory, there is no death involved. When you claim, I remember seeing that guy, that place,
why isn't there?
That thing.
Why isn't there? So you're suggesting perhaps that in certain countries where let's use Islam as an example, because we can use Islam for both sides of this argument. In some countries, Muslims have been absolutely horrendously persecuted for being Muslim. And, they are under fear of death from that. In other countries, Muslims are horrendously persecuting other people, and those people are under fear of death. Are you suggesting that those people somehow, which is the same situation you're alluding to from 2,000 years ago with the Christians, are you suggesting that those people, the way memory works is somehow different in those people who've been persecuted by Muslims, or those Muslims who have been persecuted by other people? Memory works different in them because of that persecution to how it does to people who are not being persecuted now? And if so, where are the studies that show this? Because that would be an absolutely fascinating field. Any psychologist would be all over that. If they thought, well, people being persecuted, people believing something to be true and being persecuted for that belief, that alters how we remember things. I can tell you now, psychologists would be all over that. Where is that work? Where are those papers, Luke?
All right. So I cannot give you any papers right now. We are VC during the post call. What I have to underline here, that there is a difference between an idea and an event. Right now, you chose the Muslims that are defending an idea, and they are persecuted because of an idea, not an event. Those two things are different. Do you understand the difference between those two?
You're saying that it's an event. That doesn't make it an event. We're talking about the idea of the event. We're talking about other explanations for the story. Okay, we agree that there's a story about a resurrection. We don't agree that there was a resurrection. That's the conclusion, not what we're talking. What we're talking about is the explanation of the story. What Richard has pointed out is that we have reason to believe that humans, at least recent humans, could support such a story, even if it's not true. If you're talking about death, we have lots of situations where people have died for things that turned out to be false. Okay, really the only thing that would motivate somebody there is if they believe it to be true. Okay, and they could be false in their beliefs. Their beliefs could be wrong. Okay, and so what we're saying is that we have reason to believe that that a story like that could come about due to the people telling the story being wrong, whether it be intentional, whether it be accidental, or whatever. Okay, we know that could happen at least today. we are making the assumption that we can make reasonable conclusions about the psychology, about the psychological makeup of people back then. We can assume that they can roughly do the same things that we do. And there are reasons that we can believe that. We have, some evidence that shows that the people, 2,000 years ago were not significantly different than the way we are today. And so we're saying that this is at least a possible outcome. This is a possible explanation for the story, not for any actual event. Okay. And so what you're saying is what makes most sense for the explanation of the story is that there was an actual event that occurred. Now, if our position is unfalsifiable, then obviously then your side would be unfalsifiable as well. Okay, we don't have any direct evidence of the psychology of the people that told this story. We also don't have any direct evidence of any resurrection. Okay,
what would
and
be
so
evidence for? Go ahead. Sorry.
No, sorry. Go. So were you going to ask what could be What could be evidence of a resurrection?
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the main question. What would convince you that Jesus resurrected is the main question I ask atheists. And
so what you're saying then is that you don't have any evidence, and this is why. Explaining why you don't have evidence is not the same as saying you don't need evidence. If you can't think of a way to come up with evidence, then that just explains to us why you don't have any evidence. And we're running up against the end of the show here. I want to give you the last word, okay. Luke. Go ahead. Please go ahead and say what your last comments on this.
All right. Thank you very much, Scott. So, yeah, the question, what would you need to observe so that you are proven false in your claim, is the question I ask many atheists. People say, I don't need that. You need to prove your point, and I will observe your arguments and destroy your arguments, and that's it. I will not question my position. I will not question my claim. If you try to question my claim, I will bash you on. I will make fun of you. This is what you do with the picture that you chose behind you in your live stream. Right now, you are making fun of the Jesus on the cross. You are using
let me just interject.
Thank you very much to allow me to finish. Luke, you are using Jesus wearing a bra, which is a mockery tool, right?
Luke, I've muted you because I was trying to interject and you didn't seem to be listening. So just bear with me a minute. During the conversation, ignore the picture of Jesus behind us. During the conversation, you said that when you talk to atheists about this, when you ask them for their claims and they give you, instead of giving you their claims and defending their claims, what they do is they start mocking you. What I've done and what Scott did before we took the call was explain our position. What I've done during this is try to defend that position. I've not stopped defending that position and started mocking you instead. So I don't know who these people are you're referring to when you say, when I talk to atheists, but it's not us. Please talk to us. We are getting really up to the end of the show. I'm going to unmute you just to say your last little bit, and then, we'll say our goodbyes. You are unmuted, Luke.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, so I am not saying that you were mocking me. The thing is, as long as I'm talking to you, I have this picture under my nose, the picture of Jesus wearing a bra. When you talk to me, this is what I see every time that you talk to me. Do you understand?
So what has that got to do with what we're saying to you?
Okay, when I say that people use mockery, it's because every time you say the thing that you say are with this image of Jesus wearing a bra. All the explanation that you gave are accompanied with something that I consider mockery, something that is a mockery towards every Christian or everybody who believes that this really happened. And that's why I say this is what most atheists do. I'm not saying that this is what you did during this call. Be careful about that. I agree with you. You weren't mocking me at all. I haven't had the chance to talk much, but thank you very much for giving me this end of this last word. So to finish my thoughts, there was just reading about this addressed. There was this claim that you pointed out, which is psychology, and I pointed out how the brain doesn't work the same way because the context that people were 2,000 years ago is not the same context that happened. That was when the study that you cited were made. The psychology study that you cited were made. The context is different. People were afraid to die at the time when they misremembered events. It's really important to make the difference between idea and event, because when I ask the question to people in general, not you, but to people, what was the event that caused other people to die? So they would present to the situation, either you say this didn't happen or you die, and they choose to die instead of saying this didn't happen. So
okay, I'm sorry, Luke. I'm going to have to break in here. We do have to wrap up the show. I apologize for cutting you off there. I hope that you feel comfortable and that you were at least able to get out what you were saying. I appreciate your call, and I wish we would have been able to get your call earlier. There's lots there for us to dig into, and I would welcome another call from you in the future. And if you want to come to the after show, we can continue our chat there. But Luke, thank you very much for calling, and I appreciate that. Before we wrap up the show here, I want to bring Jamie the Blind Limey back up. Thank you for helping us out today, Jamie.
Great show, guys. I know we're a little bit pressed for time, so I won't take up too much. And that last call, Luke's call, just blew all the rest of the calls out of my mind, because I found it actually significantly frustrating. One, the claim is falsifiable. The claim is not the resurrection didn't happen. The claim is it possible for people to misremember things, and so to falsify that, it'd be, falsify that, show that the psychological reasoning or the studies that we've been done were false. That memory problems of that nature are far more rare than we think they are. You can go against the methodology. There's all that kind of stuff. Secondly, I've experienced memories that I'm certain they're real to this very day, and I can find no evidence for them. And I'm so convinced, and maybe I wouldn't die for them, but it's like, denounce this memory or I'm going to tase you. I'd still go, well, hit me with the taser, because I'm so convinced it's real. One particular one, it's so weird. I'm convinced there was a beer advert in the UK that comprised a fast motion, like the time lapse of a bunch of people playing pool in a pub, while Sean Bean read the poem If by Rudyard Kipling, while a remix of Limp Bizkit's My Way played in the background. And I've never found any evidence that this advert has ever existed, but I am convinced that it did. So, and I would take physical pain for that belief, right? Plenty of people die for false beliefs all the time. We can evidence it. So I would challenge Luke to this. I will hold you to the same standard of evidence. I can evidence that people have false memories and will die for incorrect beliefs. Prove to me that even once, someone has come back from clinical death, like proper legal death, after 3 days dead. Even once. You don't even have to explain how they did it. You don't have to explain whether it was divine or scientific. Once. We've got millions of examples of people. But all you have to do, Luke, is give me just one person who was dead and was confirmed dead by legitimate medical terms and teams, and then came back provably alive 3 days later. Can you do that? I don't know. Anyway, thanks for letting me get that out, because I was just
all right. I'm glad you were able to purge there, Jamie. While we're doing that, let's throw some love rings out there. Anybody special out there need love rings today? I know. I think we could all use them. So we want to send our love out to all of our fans and viewers. And also, I want to say that if you don't believe, this is your community, and we appreciate having you here. But if you do believe, we don't hate you.
We're just not convinced. See you next week.
Boom.
We want the truth. So watch Truth Wanted live, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central. Call 512-991-9242 or visit tiny.cc/call TW.